Sometimes we have experience that can't be explained or make any sense. They can only be classified as the paranormal. Here are a few of these experiences. These are real stories from real people. Some names and places have been changed for privacy. This story comes from someone who only said his name was George. It is their true recollection of what they say happened to them. I remember when I just turned 5 years old, my birthday party was the day before, and I got all sorts of awesome toys. I had been enjoying those toys all day and was ready for bed. I told my parents good night, brushed my teeth like I did every night for as far back as I can recall. I was asleep for quite some time when I woke up to a strange noise in my room. It sounded like someone breathing hard and a scratching noise. At first I thought it might be my sister's cat. I sit up in my bed to show the cat away when I saw something that I will never forget as long as I live. A very tall man, with dark hair and black clothes, was leaning over my bed. I froze. I couldn't do anything but stare. I could still hear him breathing. It sounded more like wheezing than actual breathing. I closed my eyes, hoping this was just a dream. I waited a moment, then opened them and looked. The man was still there. Then I saw his eyes. They were red. I don't mean the color red, I mean his eyes looked like fire. I could see fire in his eyes. I started screaming. As my mom opened my door, the man turned to black smoke and was gone as the lights came on. This was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm 36 years old now and nothing compares to that man that night. What do you think? Was this a ghost, a demon? The child's imagination. From Anonymous. About 3 years ago, I was lying in bed, and I was just about to doze off, with my wife, asleep, cuddled up to me on my left side, which is our normal sleeping pattern. I was at that point where I could feel my awakened mind begin to drift out, that moment where unless you wake suddenly out of it, you more than likely won't remember that moment. All at once I feel chill on the right side of my body, and I hear some sort of weird but slow whispering, that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It was not normal whispering, they were whispering words backwards. I was jarred awake suddenly, startled, I felt a presence, my eyes darted around the room scanning for the source, but there was nothing. My heart was beating out of my chest, but again there was nothing, so I deemed it as nothing and eventually dozed off to sleep. That morning, as I'm getting my coffee, my wife casually mentions a very strange dream that she had last night, right after she fell asleep. Curious, I asked her to tell me about her dream, and she said, I dreamed I was lying in bed next to you, in our apartment, just like we always do, except I was wide awake. I felt a strange presence in our room, so I looked up and, at the foot of the bed was my friend Thomas. He looked back and forth at both of us lying in bed, then he slowly crawled up onto the bed and started whispering in your right ear. It was scary. Thomas killed himself about 8 months before this happened. This is from an anonymous Reddit user. Original post: I use an app called Sleep as Android to improve my sleep. One of the features is that it records your nighttime noises, snoring, sleep talk, cover ruffles, coughing, etc. I've been using the app since October 1st of 2013. I've never caught anything other than sounds created by me, changing positions or coughing or something like that, although I've been told several times I talk in my sleep by other people. On the 30th of December at 2:04 AM I caught something very weird. To set up, this night I was sleeping in my bed, my 3-year-old was with me that night as he is scared of the dark. It was just the two of us in the whole house. The next night, I decided to go through and delete my recordings and saw this particular recording. In it, you can hear some clicks that start to get louder over the course of the recording. Eventually you can hear me say, "What are you doing?" And immediately after, there is a deep voice that says nothing. The clicks become very loud at that point, and at the very end of the recording you hear the same voice say, "That's them, I think. I am pretty creeped out by this. I don't remember being awake that night. The only plausible explanation is that I answered my own sleeping talking, but the voice doesn't even sound like me or something I could emulate. It definitely doesn't sound like a voice my preschooler could emulate, either. I have no idea what the clicks could be. I keep a fan going at night for white noise, but the clicks sounds like they're coming from right near my phone, which is placed right by me on my bedside table. I want to say that I've picked up the clicks a few times on recordings before, but deleted them thinking it was nothing. This is the first time I've ever heard anything, though. This one is posted by a Facebook group user asking for help on what she should do. My house is haunted, what should I do? My 3- and 4-year-old daughter has been talking about a little girl and a scary man in their bathroom/closets. Their bathroom is connected to their bedroom, and there's a little closet that lines their bedroom. As far as I've been told, the little girl is their friend. She's pretty. Oldest says she has long hair and blue eyes, plays with them, and her name is Veronica. They've never heard that name before. The little girl plays with them and is very friendly, but my main concern is the scary man. The stories they tell me to terrify me. My daughter has told me he hurt her, and they have both been scared to the point of tears. I've blessed their room with prayer and holy water, sage, and they've recently been sleeping in our room or downstairs. These behaviors didn't start until we moved into a new house back in September, and have progressively gotten worse since. My daughter, who's almost 5 and has been potty trained since 2 years old, recently started peeing the bed because she's too scared to go potty during the night. I'm scared for my daughters. I don't know what else to do. My boyfriend and I have heard/seen things out of the ordinary too. Like strange voices at night, footsteps in rooms where nobody is, strange scratching in the walls, so I know it's not their imagination. At this point, I'm debating moving, but we just moved into this place 8 months ago and signed a 2-year lease. From an online anonymous Reddit user. In high school, I worked in the choral and theater departments on our yearly play. There was a girl named Teresa, who had graduated a couple of years before me. She was well known, and a very close friend of mine. She had this special ability where she could see angels and demons. Since she was a tiny girl, she would always notice these certain people walking around, wearing the same type of clothing, buttoned-up trench coats, or long dresses, etc. She said these people always had a very pale color to them. When she was much younger, she always thought it was normal and everyone could see these people like her. But then, she started noticing that they would follow people around, but the people they followed would never notice them back. Not always, but sometimes she would notice a different type of these entities. These were dressed completely in white and floating, unseen behind other unsuspecting people. She said at some point when she was a little older, all of the sudden they started realizing she could see them. Gradually they would start following her, and eventually they would show up everywhere she went. Every time they entered a room she was in, she heard a popping noise. Eventually she told her parents, and they were unsure if they should believe her or not. But then some specific instances occurred where paranormal types things couldn't really be explained away. Such as every picture taken with Teresa had a white light somewhere in the picture smeared, like an orb. And when she would say she sees one in a room, the temperature would drop depending on which type of entity it was. If they were dressed in white, the temperature stayed the same. If they were dressed in dark, the temperature would drop. And this could be seen on the thermometer. So her parents decided to take her to their priest at their church for help. They prayed over their house to help protect it from the demons coming inside. The prayers apparently worked, because the girl told my friend how there seemed to be an invisible fence around the house that kept them from coming near. But she could still see them outside of the fence congregating in large masses as though they are looking for a way through. Although this made her house safe, she cannot leave the house. She tried a few times and large masses of these entities follow her and it's just too much. I still get the shivers thinking about it. From Luke on Reddit. About 12 years ago, I was around 7 at that time. We lived in an old farmhouse. We were moving out. My parents had purchased a new home in the city for career choices. I grew up in this home, and loved every minute of it. On the night we were moving out, all my things were in boxes, and packed up ready to move. There was a terrible storm happening, and it was eerily dark outside. All of the sudden my toys started coming on, by themselves. At first, it was the remote control car. I could hear the wheels spinning inside the box. I located it and took the batteries out. Then in another box a siren on a fire truck, so I quickly found it and turned it off from the bottom. This went on for quite some time. Toys were just playing on their own. It finally stopped. I told my mom, and she said it's the storm causing this. There was a lot of lighting, and she explained it away as the electric in the air causing the toys to malfunction, and not to worry, the storm would be over soon enough. My little sister, who was 4 at the time, has always had imaginary friends. This seemed quite normal since a lot of younger kids invent friends to play with, for one reason or another. She always would go to bed before me, so I'd stay up later watching TV. I always felt like someone was staring at me. Lurking round the corner, just watching me. In the previous days leading up to us getting ready to leave, these feelings grew stronger and stronger. The day we were leaving, we had put the last of the boxes into our truck, when I decided to go back in, and make one final sweep to make sure nothing was left behind. I went into all the rooms, and just glanced. When I looked into my room, I felt sad, knowing this was a final goodbye to somewhere I spent my entire life at. Tears swelled up, but I wiped it away, because I didn't want anyone seeing me being emotional. I voiced a goodbye out loud. As I turned to leave, I heard a child's voice say "see you later." I stopped dead in my tracks. Frozen. I turned, and a little red truck was rolling up slowly and stopped at my feet. It took me a moment to pull myself together and I ran quickly from the house. My dad asked me what was wrong. I said there's a toy left in the basement but it's not mine, let's just go. We left. When we were grown, I finally got the courage to talk about this experience to my family. Each of us had a different unexplainable experience on that day, but nobody wanted to tell anyone, because none of us believe in the supernatural, so we kept it to ourselves until we were older and others were talking about their experience. A chill still runs down my spine when I think about that day. From online user, Sam. When I was about 10 or 11 years old, I had friends sleeping over. We had been playing video games and had been up extremely late. It was around 4 a.m., and we were all tired. We had switched the light out, and the only light was coming from the screensaver on my computer. A small hint of light came from the small opening in the curtain, where the moon was slightly visible in the sky. I was laying there for around 10 minutes trying to doze off when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone standing on the other side of the bed. This figure had a white glow to him. I didn't feel scared or that it was anything bad, it felt more peaceful. The door was shut and nobody had opened the door, it was still shut. This figure moved from one side of the bed to the other. I closed my eyes, thinking it's my imagination, and opened them again, and the figure was now in front of the bed looking down at me. I got a better look, and noticed it was wearing all white, and a white glow was coming from its body. I finally fell asleep or passed out from sheer exhaustion. The next morning, one of my friends mentioned this white figure in the room, then each of us gave our recollection of the same thing. None of us felt scared of it, which made me feel it was either an angel or a good spirit of some sort. I've never seen anything like that again. Stephen from Indiana. After major back surgery a few years ago, I went into a rehab facility in Louisville, Kentucky the first night. After my surgery, I pressed the buzzer for the nurse to find out who the man was that was sitting in my room, on the recliner. She came in, and assured me nobody was sitting in the recliner, and when I looked back he was gone. I dozed back off due to medication making me drowsy. Then I woke up a few hours later, and the man was back sitting in the recliner. This time he was humming. Again, pressed the buzzer to call the nurse. This time a different nurse came in. I told her about a man sitting in the chair and humming. Her mouth gasped open, and she asked what was the man humming. I said it sounds like the theme song from the Andy Griffith Show. Her eyes became larger than saucers, and she ran out of the room frantic. Another nurse came back and gave me medicine to make me go back to sleep. Several hours later, and young lady came in and woke me to take blood. She was talking really low since she said she's not supposed to talk about it, but said the nurses were all talking about Frank, who had died just the day before I came in. She said they can't tell me anything about it due to HIPAA, but she felt like I needed some sort of explanation, and not to tell anyone what she told me or she'd get fired. He was in the hospital to have his gallbladder removed, and was there about 4 days prior to his surgery due to a few other issues. His heart quit unexpectedly during surgery. They could not revive him. She said he always sat in the recliner, and he was always humming the song from Andy Griffith's Show. I almost fell out of my bed. I had reasoned in my head that this was probably someone from the hospital's chapel or someone like that, but nothing supernatural. I seen him often my entire stay at that facility. I couldn't wait to get discharged and be back home. June from Florida. I was never someone who believed in ghosts or those things that go bump in the night. I was a straight shooter. I believe in what I can see with my own eyes. This was until something strange happened to me. It was the first time living on my own. I moved into a studio apartment in small, quaint little town near the university I was attending. It was cheaper to rent a place a little ways out from the university, and I had to cut costs in any way I could. Rent was half the price since it wasn't near the university. Before moving into the apartment, I had researched the area, and this building. It was built in the early 1920s and had no history of any deaths or murders in that building. I had been living in the apartment for a few months when I was getting ready to go to class one morning. I was sitting in my chair, sipping on coffee before starting my day, and just happened to notice something weird on the floor. I got up, and walked over to it to get a better look. It was a piece of the door to the attic. I looked up, and the attic door was completely broken, and hanging down, and pieces of it lay around on the floor. I immediately called the landlord and reported the attic. She sent someone out the next morning to repair the attic door. A few weeks later, the same thing happened again, but this time it was a little more intense. I was asleep and woke suddenly, with the feeling that someone was rubbing my leg. I raised up and saw a shadow flow across the room. I was terrified. My heart was beating out of my chest. I yelled, "I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it." I didn't really have a gun, but I was hoping that would scare this intruder away. I phoned the police, and they came out. They crawled up in the attic, and investigated. After a while, they came down, and advised me that it looks like someone has definitely been up in the attic, but there's no way anyone can get in from the outside, they have to be coming up from this drop-down door since it's the only way in and out. I was alarmed. There's no way anyone was in this small apartment when I went to sleep. You can see the entire apartment from one room, it's small. The police did their report, and left. My friend stayed over for a few days since I was still upset. She gave me an idea, to set up a hidden camera, so if this happens again there's evidence for the police. So we went out and purchased a nanny cam, and secured it in a good spot that shows the full view of the bed. A few days go by and again I was suddenly shaken in my sleep, by someone breathing on my neck. I jumped up out of the bed, and screamed. Whatever it was vanished out of the room the moment my eyes opened. I immediately called the police, and my friend, and she was there before the police. We grabbed the nanny cam and reviewed the footage. What we saw will forever haunt me. As the footage is recording, I'm laying asleep and suddenly a dark figure floats into the room, no feet touching the ground, and leans over my bed. He turns once, and the shadow of his hands on the wall clearly come into view. Long fingers with claws. Its fingers seem to be 10 inches long. We were both terrified. What is this thing? We gave the footage to the police, and I packed up my belongings and left that day. I called my dad, and he went back and got my furniture and other things. I decided to pay the extra money and live near the campus. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was, and what it was after. When me and my friend tried contacting the police later on, to see what they discovered, they basically blew us off, and wanted the whole thing shoved under a rug. I wish now we had made a copy of that footage. Had my friend not came up with the idea to place a camera in the room, I would have always second-guessed myself, and who knows what would have happened to me. I still have nightmares about this whole experience. This one is from an online user group. Her name is Nikki. My friend's aunt is a doctor, who works in the ICU unit at their local hospital. Her patient was very sick and was unconscious. Suddenly, he coded. His heart flatlined. The nurse called the doctor in and they began life-saving CPR and ended up using a defibrillator on the patient. It took a long 10 minutes to get the patient's heart back beating. After the patient regained conscious, he called the doctor and nurses in. He thanked them all for saving his life and began telling them everything he saw in the room when he had no heartbeat. He also told them everything each one of them had said and exactly where they stood in the room during the ordeal. He also gave them the exact time his heart stopped. He explained he was in the corner above them watching, and was not in his body. What really stood out, is he also saw the light flicker twice in the room. I was 10 years old when it happened. My bed was below my window. I remember I always used to sit up in my bed, gazing out of the window, looking deep into the forest. It always fascinated me as a child. To me, magical things happened just beyond in that forest. Behind our house was this majestic forest that I spent endless days exploring, but never at night. One night I was in a deep sleep, when I was startled awake, by this sound of something rubbing across my window. When my eyes finally adjusted, I could see there was a huge figure at my window. As my eyes adjusted more I could see he was looking down at me and his hands were rubbing the glass. I was in this shock. I could not even take a breath. I finally let out a scream, and my parents ran into the room. After several minutes of utter shock, I finally told them what happened. My dad grabbed a flashlight and his gun, and ran outside and searched the area, and even partly into the forest and found nothing. They decided I was having a nightmare, and had me sleep in their room for the night. What terrified me most, was most nights I sleep with the window wide open to get a breeze. This night I was just a little chilly and had closed and locked it. My dad searched by my window, and did find some huge footprints that weren't shoes or human but more of animal in nature. The footprints were about 16 inches long and had long toes. I remember this because my dad wrote this all down in a journal and kept a record of it. He took pictures of the prints. He became fascinated with trying to figure out what it was, and would spend a lot of evenings searching the woods for any signs of it. This didn't happen again for a few months, then I was asleep and again, I suddenly woke to a sound coming from outside. I wiped my eyes and tried to focus on what it was. This time, It was about 15 feet back from my window but staring directly at me, just standing there. It was about 8 feet tall, hairy all over and dark. When our eyes met it let out a grunt and dashed into the forest. I've never seen it again. I'm not sure what this creature was, or why he was watching me. Maybe he was hungry or just curious. I don't know, but I'm glad I never found out. Me and my husband separated, and I had found this cute little apartment for me and my 7-year-old little girl. It was in a decent neighborhood, with a good school. The apartment was 2-bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, a small living room, and a few closets. It was perfect for just us. The day we finished moving our things in, it was deep into the summer and very hot. We still had a lot of unpacking to do, but it could wait until tomorrow. We were both exhausted, and ready for a good night's sleep in our new home. For some reason my daughter slept with me this night, which sometimes happened but not typical. A few hours later, my daughter wakes me by poking at my side. I look over at her, and she's pointing at the open door which views the doorway to her bedroom. There stood the silhouette of a man. I couldn't make out what he was holding in his hand. Quickly, I jumped up, and locked the bedroom door, and grabbed my cell phone and called 911. I could hear someone running on the floor and rustling with the lock, then the door slams. The police arrived fairly quickly, and could find no signs of someone forcing their way in. But what they did find was in a closet, and terrifying. There was a notebook, with names written in it, some were crossed out, and some pictures of females, some were children, some were young women. Some cake wrappers, gloves, and a rope. The man had to be hiding in the closet, waiting for his chance, waiting for us to fall asleep. To this day, I worry what would have happened if I had opened that closet door when we were unpacking that day. It's terrifying thinking about what ifs. That concludes Creepy Stories Volume 1. Keep your eye out for Volume 2 coming soon. If you enjoyed these stories, please subscribe, like and share.